Chuck Connors. You won't believe what really lived behind the stare of that tall cowboy on your old black and white TV. The one with the Winchester rifle and steady hand. To most of America he was Lucas McCain, a widowed father, a moral compass, the man who could shoot faster than you could blink. But what if I told you that behind that role was a real man? A man who battled heartbreak, chased impossible dreams, and carried a secret pain no camera ever caught? Chuck Connors wasn't born a cowboy. He was born Kevin Joseph Aloysius Connors. Yeah, try fitting that on a jersey, on April 10, 1921 in a tough Brooklyn neighborhood. His parents, Irish immigrants, worked themselves ragged during the Great Depression. His dad loaded ships on the docks. His mom pieced together small cleaning jobs. The apartment was always cold, money was always tight, and the idea of dreams seemed almost laughable. But Chuck had one escape: motion. Running, jumping, throwing, catching, he didn't do it for fun. He did it to feel alive. Bay Ridge sidewalks were his training ground, his sanctuary. At just 14 years old, his raw athleticism caught the eye of a coach. That coach offered him a scholarship to a private prep school, Adelphi Academy. Overnight, Chuck went from threadbare shoes to coat and tie classrooms. He later said, "I never felt like I belonged. But I knew I had to make it count." And he did. He wasn't just good, he was great. Baseball, basketball, football, track. He played them all with everything he had. Sports were more than a way out. They were survival. They were a shot at a life he couldn't even picture yet. And that tenacity led him to Seton Hall University, where his athletic career exploded. Now get this, Chuck Connors was one of only 13 men in history to play both Major League Baseball and NBA basketball. He signed with the Boston Celtics for their very first season, standing tall at 6 feet 5 inches, which back then made you practically a skyscraper. He even made history as the first NBA player to break a backboard during a game. But his heart? That still beat for baseball. In 1949 he made his MLB debut with the Brooklyn Dodgers, his hometown team. He stepped up to the plate for the first time in the majors, and grounded into a double play. That was it. One game. A blink. And he was sent back to the minors. Years later he admitted, "I thought that was it. That I'd blown it all." But Chuck Connors didn't quit. He kept swinging in the minors, bouncing between teams like the Montreal Royals and the LA Angels. Finally, in 1951, the Chicago Cubs gave him another shot. He played 66 games, hit .239, and knocked out a couple home runs. Not bad, but not enough to stick. Slowly, painfully, he started to realize that maybe, just maybe, the field wasn't where he'd leave his mark. And then came fate, disguised as a routine minor league game. In 1952, while playing for the Los Angeles Angels, he hit a towering home run that caught the eye of someone unexpected, a casting director from MGM. The guy wasn't looking for actors, but when he saw Chuck at the plate, all rugged presence and raw intensity, he turned to a friend and said, "That guy looks like the Laurence Olivier of baseball." A week later, Chuck Connors walked into MGM for a screen test. The camera started rolling, and something clicked. It wasn't just that he looked the part. He felt it. The same focus and fire he'd used in sports poured into the screen. 3 days later, he signed his first acting contract. The boy from Brooklyn had just found a second act. His first few roles were small, bit parts in films like Pat and Mike with Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. But even those moments mattered. Tracy reportedly told him, "Stick with it. You've got something." That lit a fire in Chuck that even baseball couldn't match. Then came a little Disney movie called Old Yeller. Chuck played a frontier father, stern, warm, believable. Producers working on a new Western about a widowed rancher saw it and thought, "That's our guy." That show would become The Rifleman. Now here's something most people don't know. Chuck almost turned it down. The salary was less than he was used to. But MGM sweetened the deal by offering him 5% of the show's profits. It was a gamble. Chuck took it. And what happened next? TV history. The Rifleman debuted in 1958. Chuck Connors as Lucas McCain. Single father. Sharp shooter. Soft heart. The show connected in a way few had before. Viewers didn't just watch it, they felt it. Letters came pouring in. From war vets. From single dads. From lonely kids. They said, "Lucas McCain made me feel safe." One man from Idaho wrote, "I never had a dad, but I had the Rifleman." And that mattered. Chuck threw himself into the role. He trained with weapons experts to perfect that lightning-fast Winchester spin. He rewrote lines to make Lucas sound like a real rancher, not a Hollywood caricature. He even brought in old teammates and friends as guest stars. He didn't just play Lucas McCain, he became him. But that transformation came with a cost. The public stopped seeing Chuck Connors. All they saw was Lucas. Casting directors typecast him. Fans expected that same stoic cowboy in every public appearance. He once admitted in a letter, "I haven't looked in the mirror and seen Chuck in years. I only see Lucas. And I'm not sure who's left underneath." Behind the scenes though, there was one relationship that remained deeply real. His bond with Johnny Crawford, the actor who played his son Mark. Off-screen, their connection was every bit as powerful. Chuck took Johnny camping, taught him to fish, introduced him to his baseball buddies. They talked about life, not fame. Not roles. Years later, at Chuck's funeral, Johnny broke down during his eulogy. "He wasn't just a co-star. He was a real father to me. He made me feel safe when I was scared. He was there when it counted." But Chuck's personal life wasn't all warmth and campfire stories. In fact, it was often a storm behind the smile. He was married 3 times. The first to Elizabeth Riddell, with whom he had 4 sons. On paper, the perfect American family. But Hollywood whispered about his affairs, late nights, and disappearing acts. By the early 60s, that marriage was over. Then came Carmela DeLevy, an Indian actress he met on set. Their interracial marriage turned heads in a racially divided America. But while the headlines cheered, their private life cracked under tension and conflict. Friends said it was more PR than partnership. His third and final marriage was to a former Playboy bunny more than 30 years younger. It was brief, flashy, and, again, ended in heartbreak. And his relationships with his kids? Complicated. One son said, "Everyone else got Lucas McCain. We just got someone who missed birthdays." Behind the scenes, Chuck Connors, the man millions saw as the ideal father, struggled to be one in real life. Some female co-stars also began speaking out years later. They remembered him as magnetic, sure, but also unpredictable. "He didn't always know when the performance ended," one said. While no formal accusations surfaced, many chose never to work with him again. As the years passed and his fame faded, Chuck tried to branch out. He played a disgraced officer in Branded. He took on darker roles like a ruthless slave owner in Roots, a performance that earned him an Emmy nod but left longtime fans shocked. He even stepped into sci-fi in Soylent Green. But no matter how hard he tried, Hollywood kept pulling him back to the saddle. In 1991, almost 3 decades after The Rifleman ended, Chuck returned as Lucas McCain for a TV movie. While picking out the character's hat, he broke down and cried. This wasn't nostalgia. This was identity. But just months later, he was diagnosed with lung cancer. He died on November 10, 1992, at the age of 71. At his funeral, the line between character and man blurred one last time as Johnny Crawford stood in front of a crowd and whispered through tears, "He was my father." So what do we take from this? Chuck Connors wasn't perfect. He carried secrets, made mistakes, hurt people. But he also inspired millions, gave everything to his craft, and left behind a legacy that still echoes across generations. He was more than Lucas McCain. And maybe less too. But that's what makes his story so deeply human. If Chuck Connors ever meant something to you, if you ever sat beside your dad or grandpa and watched The Rifleman together, leave a comment below. Share your story. And if this tribute touched something in you, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and help us keep these legends alive. Because behind every icon is a man. And sometimes, that man is more unforgettable than the myth he left behind.